Alright, so back to this. Holy shit, literally just finished the show like 5 minutes ago. That was a wild ride. I'm so glad that I did the mid-season video when I did, right at the end of episode 6, because, shit really started to pick up after that. So, yeah, damn, I'm still, like, kind of taking it all in, but yeah, the show is crazy. That was a wild ride, but I didn't know there was a 13th episode. I had to look it up separately from the main 12, but I guess I'm glad I watched it, because that puts kind of an end to the series, right? A definitive end to the season and show, so again, it's something to where, yeah, I feel like I got all of it, so, or, again, got the gist of it, or like, yeah, I took it all in, so, we're still taking it in, right? But, I was able to experience the whole thing, so, again, there's that, right? So, again, but what else does that come down to? And then what does it mean for this video? Because I'm not going to do a thoughts and opinions video, kind of like how I did for the mid-season one. The mid-season one kind of act as my thoughts and opinions for pretty much the entire show. Like, what I said there still kind of applies. This video, and as you can tell by the title, is rather going to be a thought experiment. And one, again, kind of probably answering the main, because, again, the show, it leaves a lot of questions, right? There's a lot of questions to be had about the show, right? It's very confusing, it's not apparent or obvious what's going on. Like, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't even really following the story. I even talked about this in the mid-season thoughts. Like, I don't fucking care about the story, right? I'm just watching to see what happens, right? That's kind of how I felt. Like, I was not keeping track of the story whatsoever. I think I got a general idea, but anything specific I would not be able to talk about. So, but, and the reason why I get to this thought experiment and this question, as you can tell by the title of the video, right, it's something to where I do feel like there is one question that I kind of want to try and answer, or at the very least, reason my way towards. And again, I'm not going to worry about anything story-related, plot-related, lore-related, right? It's literally just, again, as you can tell, character-related, right? And probably the biggest question I have, and I feel like most people would have, and given the show itself and based off that, right? And as you can tell, by its title, right? It's, what is Lain, right? Just what is her, right? And that's something to where, I think I'm going to try to answer it to the best of my abilities. So, again, it's something to where it's like, because, again, it's really not obvious, right? Not even going to try to think about the story, not even going to try to think about plot, no lore, right? Ignoring completely all of that. For me, it's like, again, I just want to answer this, or at least reason and think about it, the one question of what is Lain, right? And I guess, well, two questions, technically. What is Lain, right? Not who, what, right? Bigger things there, right? And then also, was a normal life possible for her? And I'll kind of explain that or elaborate on that once I'm done with my kind of evaluation or sort of explanation or just reasoning or thinking about, thought experiment on what is Lain, right? So, but with that, again, I guess we can just get into it. So, what is Lain? And here's what I'll start by saying. Well, actually, before I even get into that, what I want to say is I know there's a PS1 game for Lain. I don't have it, and I'm never going to have it because I don't have a PS1. I guess I could watch, like, a play. I don't even know what it is. I just know that there's a game out there related to Lain. I haven't seen it. I'll probably never see it, but so I'm just going strictly based off the show. I don't know if the game gives more explanation or what, but that is irrelevant because I have not seen it. Maybe I should look at it, but who knows, right? But beyond that, again, let's actually answer the question, because I just needed to say that and put that out there, right, for clarification and, just for transparency, or not transparency, but, just, again, yeah, clarification and just background context. So, but with that, again, we can get into the question of the actual question and how the video was Lain. So here's what I'm going to say. Lain, I feel like, is something that's ever transforming and ever, changing, evolving, I guess you can put it. And what I mean by that is it's different depending on where you look in the series. like, or like at what point in, well, just the, not series, but the fucking show, right? At what point in the show, it's different depending on when you look at it there. Where you look at it there. So, like, for example, I feel like we have a pretty good idea of what Lain is at the very beginning of the show, in the very end of the show. I think it's pretty clear who and what Lain is at the start and then end or finish of the show. In between is when it starts to get hazy and when it starts to get fuzzy and when, you know, it becomes hard to answer that question, and it becomes, again, you know, and it's something to where it's like, yeah, it's not so apparent or obvious there. So at the beginning of the show, Lain is a person. Whether she is a human who is naturally born, whether she was somehow lab grown, whether she was an artificial personality or like some sort of personality given an artificial body, right? Regardless of any of those, and because I feel like those would probably be the main interpretations, right? You know, regardless of any of those, she is a person who exists in real time and space at the start of the show and goes to school, interacts with students, has her family, air quotes, and has her very starter, you know, red laptop. That is Lain at the beginning. Again, I feel like there's no doubt that she is a real person at that point, or at the very least gives off that perception and believes or views herself to be that way, even if she wasn't natural born, she even lab grown, you know, or just some like AI given an artificial body, right? Regardless of what, you know, she is, I guess ironic given the title, regardless of what she is a person. That's at the beginning. At the end, Lain is, I guess, still a person, right? Just without a body, right? And again, you know, I guess it's kind of hard to put it, but in the beginning, Lain is a person in a body, right? In the end, Lain is a person out of a body. Again, as for what happened to her actual physical body, whatever it may be, it's quite possible that maybe it was destroyed along with the other equipment or technology in the end, or end sequence of, I think it was episode 12. It's possible that, you know, through the technology and I guess the quote, air quotes, God of, you know, The Wired, right? That would be my best guess, is that her actual physical body, because again, you know, even if, and well, let's start off with this. So Lain is a person non-inhabiting a body, and she is not inhabiting anyone's memories, given that she effectively erased herself from them, with the exception of Alice initially, but then we see in episode 13 that she followed through, and even though she was able to actually still meet Alice, I don't think that was her physical body. I mean, we see it's an Alice in the future, right? And then Lain is still in quote-unquote the present, even though the present is the future at that point. So it's more so probably a projection as opposed to anything else. Or even if they're able to perceive her, it's not her own physical body, physical version of her. It's something where, again, she says then she's still able to, you know, exist or, you know, again, be with her, right? Even though it's not in the old way where they were students together, right? It has to be like in a time removed, and to where, again, nobody really has memories, right? In fact, she believes she's meeting Lain for the first time. So it's something to where, again, you know, Lain exists, right? Definitely in the end, but it's something to where not within anyone's memories. She exists kind of in her own landscape. That's literally the title of the last, you know, episode. And then again, but she is still able to, what would you call it, interact and be with Alice there, right? Her quote-unquote only friend. Just, again, not with her having already known her, as if she was a completely new person. And again, like I said, not a physical body, more so just a perception, which is why she would need to be a new person, given that, again, it is her Lane's quote-unquote present self, well, is the future Alice. And it's also might be the future teacher, too, which is a little soft spot. Whatever. So that's the thing. She exists in the future, just not in an actual... or Lain exists at the end, not the future, at the end. It just takes place in the future, just not within an actual body. She's still a person, just not inhabiting a body. And this is where I wanted to get to as for what actually happened to her body, because even though she had completely, I guess, quote-unquote, transcended into the digital virtual-like landscape of the Wired, again, you know, independent of any device and or sort of medium through there, again, because the whole point was, even though she had all the devices, you know, the Navi and, you know, the Wire that I was actually able to get her to there, right? You know, it was something to where once, again, that was attained, you needed to just get rid of the medium, right? So... again, she's now a device-free, right, independent. But again, as for what, even if that's the case, she still had a physical body at the start, and something must have happened to her. And again, my best guess is that was destroyed in the technological, or like whatever, you know, the explosion or like implosion at the end of episode 12 with the quote-unquote god of the Wired. So that's my best guess, or I don't want to say best guess because I'm pretty sure that's what it was. That is where she is at the end, you know, at the finish, right? Her body was destroyed in that kind of explosion or implosion, right? And then from there on out, again, you know, she wipes herself from the memories of everyone, but it's also something where because she has kind of transcended into the Wire, not needing any sort of medium, right, and existing kind of in that digital virtual landscape and really breaking down the boundary between that and reality, is that's kind of the whole point. Again, she is still able to exist without a body as her own person again, and was able to kind of project herself on, I guess, future Alice and her husband there, I guess. Or at least they were able to perceive her in how she presented herself that way as present Alice versus, or present Lain, even though, again, she had no memory. So that was a bit complicated. Again, this is unscripted, but that, I feel like, I'm pretty confident that's where she is at the end. You know, Alice is a person Jesus Christ. Lain is a person inhabiting a body, regardless of origin. At the end, Lain is a person that exists not inhabiting a body, but is, because she has transcended, she is able to project and still be perceived by Alice, whom she allows herself to, just, again, as her present self rather than future self, given that Alice has no memory of her. It's their first time meeting in Alice's eyes. That I'm pretty confident in setting. Where it gets mushy and messy is in between. Because, again, going back to the beginning, because at the end, the problem is kind of, okay, like, where does Alex exist? Or freaking Lain exist if she exists? Nowhere does she exist. Everywhere. What is the state of her existence? At the beginning, it is more along the lines of Lain's origin, how she was created. Again, I said she could be natural born, lab grown, and or, you know, somehow an AI given an artificial body without its knowledge. That's as close to a human body as possible. And why this is relevant to the middle is at some point there is two lanes. I don't think, because I guess you can make the argument, oh, it's all one lane, right? I guess, yeah, you know, it is all one lane, because Lain just exists as one person in everyone else's mind and memories and via their perception. But, again, it's still, even if that is the case, even practically if it's one lane, again, given sort of the memory lapses there, right, and the confusion involved, I think that there's still definitively two lanes, you know, at least two different acting lanes. And again, how this makes things messy and mushy is depending on how you view Lain's sort of creation, an origin there, how she was created, right, what she is. Because it would differ depending on that. And it's also, I will say, it's also quite possible that there is three lanes, and I'll kind of get into that, but... and I'm going to go over kind of how, based on how you potentially view Lain, how that would impact what the split lane would look like. So, for example, if you believe Lain to be a natural born person, right? Like if she was an actual human, and her parents are, I guess, her parents, quote unquote, right? Because even though we see him leave, and this is where I'm getting to, is it's quite possible if she's actually real natural born human, that she probably is just extremely bipolar, has like some multiple personality disorder like bipolarism, or just straight up like schizophrenic, just severe like mental illness and mental what would you call it, mental illness and mental there's a better term for it, I guess. Mental, I don't want to say handicap, but again, mental illness that basically creates two separate and split personalities, where you would have the Lain who, again, is kind of, I guess, the original, quote unquote, right? Or the one who is innocent in a sense, the one who she views as herself. And then you have kind of the alternate personality Lain, who is, I don't want to say exists on the Wired, but it's just, again, sort of her alternate persona, right? The evil, malicious one, that I guess kind of, again, that acts on her own. And the reason why I don't want to say exists in the Wired is because we get the one scene with Lain, the two agents, and the owner who's having her fix his computer, where the alternate personality Lain makes itself apparent and appears. So if you view Lain as, again, this natural born human, then that would be a situation where that would be evidence and or proof for, okay, she is this natural born human, and there is, again, two different personalities, right? You have, again, the innocent Lain, and then the alternate personality Lain, right? And you see that switch, like, or that was a bad snap there. Whether or not it's true, I don't know. The argument can be made, okay, I mean, her parents leave her supposed quote-unquote parents, but that could also be her schizophrenia acting up, right? Again, you need to take with a grain of salt what you're seeing, given the lens that it's being shown through. But that's, again, kind of how a natural-born Lain would work. It would just be again, you'd have innocent Lain, which is herself, the one that's kind of being tormented by all this, and then alternate personality Lain, who's, again, more evil, malicious, and takes over, and that's the one that's been acting, at least when it started, has been acting on the Wired, right? And, again, also who her friends have claimed to seen at Siberia, right? Because they physically saw her there. She has no memory. That could be alternate personality Lain, right? Taking over for her and then being at Siberia there, but also mainly on the Wired, right? That's what we would see there. And what I mean by, and this is where I get into how potentially there are three Lains, because it's quite possible if Lain is natural born and that's the route you go, then it's something to where it's like alternate personality Lain could have potentially made a virtual, because the technological prowess of Lain is undoubted, right? Regardless of what she is. If she's natural born human in this version, what she's done, like, it would not be surprising if she created somehow like an AI or artificial copy of herself, alternate personality Lain, that would act on the Wired for her. So a completely digital copy of Lain based on her alternate personality, with her alternate personality obviously still existing within herself because it's the whole bipolar schizophrenic thing. And then that would be the real life versions that we see with the, again, whatever's going on, the Wired being all, the AI version, right? So, but that's kind of, again, going down that route. That's just, I'm presenting options because I genuinely don't know the answer. Because, again, it is something to where it's like, who knows? I don't, right? But this is one of the biggest questions I want to answer was Lain. Another possibility is that she's like lab grown somehow, wasn't natural born, doesn't have parents. That is would explain, her parents, I guess, that she was assigned, quote unquote, right? And then that assumes that her father leaving her in that one scene was quote unquote father was actually real, that they weren't. That would explain why her mother was so apathetic towards her. And then how her father was a bit more interested, and again, how he even warned her about, the Wired, right? And how him admitting that he kind of treated her like his own daughter, right? How even though he wasn't supposed to have emotion, he like kind of loved her like she was a daughter, and will explain why he was more invested in her there. So still, kind of lab grown is this ultimate kind of biological, like, I guess, what would you call it? Like superhuman in a sense, or at least just with the way her brain is wired, ironically, and functions. And that would explain why she has such technological prowess. Again, it still assumes that she is in a physical body, right? Like an actual living, breathing body, just somewhat lab grown. Serial experiment Lain, right? It's the title. Again, and that would explain her sort of predisposition, or what would you call it? Her sort of, there's a better term for it, not predisposition, but sort of, not perception, or preception, I guess, I don't know, to technology, right? And again, that make a lot of sense there. It would also, like, I guess it would explain some, like, other things, right? Because then rather than it being chalked up to mental illness or sort of alternate personality, it could just be, a function of her at that point, right? You have sort of lab grown, like you can just basically input an alternate personality right into that, or into her there. So then that would end up being something to where it's like, okay, then it actually makes it easier, because rather than mental illness, it's just, rather than being what would you call it, rather than being sort of a design flaw, I guess, in a sense, it is a, what's the term? It is a, Jesus Christ, it is a, I'm blanking on the word, not factor, it's like, Jesus Christ, I swear I must have like dementia or Alzheimer's or something. It is a feature. It's a feature. Rather than a flaw, it's a feature. So that'd be the difference there. And then still possibility of the AI. But that would, again, be kind of another explanation. And again, the big thing being, because the big question is how do we, again, I still believe there's two. Again, maybe there's only one actual person, Lain, but still there's at the very least multiple actors that are Lain in these instances, right? Regardless of if it's just one person or one body. So kind of the third interpretation is that she is somehow like an AI given an artificial body. It's just somehow like very clearly it takes place in the future. I mean, even though the show's made in the 90s, we can see very clearly it's like very futuristic, right? So it's something to where they could create a body, artificial, and then just input her AI in it, if that is what she truly is, right? Then that'd be something to where the AI itself would just contain simply, the alternate version of her, right? It wouldn't even be, it would just be as if they were one, right? Just again, kind of how the memories work, would just be the explanation, and the explanatory factor there, right? It would be like a flick of a switch, that where you could switch it, right? But again, that's something to where it's then, because I feel like the most interesting thing is, again, the professor, right? With kind of basically using child's thoughts for energy, and then he kind of passes on and it's never touched on again. Don't want to say that was the one Lain was involved in, but who knows? But again, it's possible that she was somehow, again, this AI given artificial body. And then, yeah, it'd be something to where that would give even more, what would you call it, reason as to why she freaking died, in that, why at least her body was destroyed in that technological incident or accident at the end of episode 12 with, again, quote-unquote, God of the Wired. So, again, but then it's also something to where it's like, I mean, we literally see her bleed in that episode, I think, but I guess, like it's a Terminator, right? Let's put that way. So, and it's something to where it's like there's a beating heart. So if it were truly, again, it's just, but that's looking too much into it, right? And the point being, that would also explain, like, for example, like just some other seemingly, like, what would you call it? Just like weird, I guess, feats of, not necessarily weird, but the fact that she's able to interact so fluidly with, we see her attach all these things to herself, right? As if it's like transferring data near the end of the series, like all the wires and stuff. mean, that would make perfect sense, but if it was in a completely artificial body. But again, who knows? The point being, regardless of these interpretations, we don't really know. Like, I'd be more willing... I want to kind of go with the human interpretation, because my issue or kind of problem there, I guess, is that, like, again, because this kind of leads into the second question for me, and probably the big one I want to answer and bring up as well is, was a normal life possible for Lain? And this is going based off of how she was in the beginning. Because again, regardless, she was a person inhabiting a body, living and existing in the real world. Regardless of her origin or creation, that was where she was at the beginning. It's only in the end where she no longer has a physical body that was destroyed. But again, she is transcended. So she still exists and is still a person, just, again, in not existing within anyone's memories, right? Because she wiped them all, but still existing, given that she transcended and was able to show herself, you know, be perceived, what would you call it, and sort of, there's a better P term for it, I guess, yeah, there's a better P term for it, not be perceived, but try and project herself onto future Alice there, but who knows? But again, the thing is, was such a normal life possible? Because if we take her as a normal human being, then, I mean, it was, right? Like, it's something to where maybe, you know, again, with the turning point in the point of critical, I guess, you know, the critical point being when her dad confronts her about the Navi, right? You know, and the Wired, about it, you know, being nothing more than just a medium of communication, right? And then her saying it's wrong and the lines like blurred. And then that's where shit really starts to roll downhill, right? But again, would such a normal life be possible if she was truly human and was able to get help? Even if she was, let's say, lab grown, right? Like we had, like, is a possibility. So long as she could have gotten help and, again, kind of took a step back from the Wired via her Navi at that point in time, she wasn't too far gone at that point. It's only from that point onward, from when she responds to her dad that way onward, that I feel as though she's too far gone. But at any point before then, she could have turned around, I believe. Again, if she was human and or like maybe potentially land grown. If she was an AI occupying an artificial body, it's hard to make that same extension. But again, who really knows there, right? You know, the point being, it's an interesting thought if such a normal life was possible, because if we're assuming, again, you know, it all depends on that origin and creation. But if she was, the big thing is if she was able to get the help that she needed, then I do believe it is. And she wouldn't be in such a scenario, you know, to where she would need to transcend and get rid of herself pretty much from everyone's memories. You know, it sucks. It's a sucky thing to do because now she's just all alone. I mean, granted, now she started anew and was able to, again, you know, talk to Alice, right? Interact with her. She was there the whole time, but again, it's still a sad thing. You would rather have been there, you know, in that time, present in your own body as opposed to anything else. With that, it's been 28, so again, I guess I can touch on a couple other things. Again, not going to go over the story plot, you know, lore, just because, again, I'm not even going to bother trying. I guess the big thing in it, because the show is very clearly philosophical. And kind of my take on it is that, and this is going to sound ironic given I said, you know, I'm not a big believer of the one, you know, Lain theory. Or I guess maybe there is one Lain body, but again, you still at least have multiple actors as Lain. For me, again, and this, like, it'll be ironic, but rather, you know, what's real, what's not real, what's virtual, what's digital, right? None of that matters. Because at the end of the day, it is something to where it's like, it's all one or the other, right? It's all the same. Like, physical, okay, I hit my hand, right? You know, like, you can make the argument that you are listening to me hitting my hands, right? You know, you as the viewer, right? That is via a virtual or digital medium. However, Think about how you're watching this right now. It is on a device. It is on a device that is built by materials that sends electromagnetic signals, and then you are listening to audio waves that go into your ears that are then, processed in your brain. The point I'm making is that no matter how you dig into virtual and or digital stuff, it can all be traced back to the physical. But then the inverse counter argument can be made that it is all the mind anyway, and that is all mental, and that it is your mental image and projection that is what gives it that physical form. Like, for example, I am sitting in my room. It's the age-old question. Do I know if anything outside my room truly exists? Who knows? I won't until I step out. Like, that's the thing, right? So, until I myself perceive it, I don't truly know whether or not it exists. So is it my mind or is it physical? Again, it is the mind into physical, into digital, virtual. So the whole physical, digital, virtual argument is irrelevant because it can either be physical, all of it, or it can be mental, all of it, right? Whether or not it's digital or virtual, it doesn't really matter to the real world. There's no distinction between real and wired, and that's what we see at the end, that, Lain's completely able to exist there. So, and it's regardless of whether it's physical and or your mind, there'd be a God either way, or even digital virtual. We see the digital virtual God, air quotes, right? Because it's not truly a God. Because again, as Lain mentioned, it didn't exist prior to the existence of the wired. It was just a stand-in until that point. Or it's just a stand-in God, as there would have needed to have been a greater God prior to then to, again, be able to kind of create a stand-in for that, and the fact that the stand-in God needed physical form and to be able to hurt Lain, even if it wasn't a physical human body, to be able to transfer and sort of translate or project himself, like there would still need to be a physical worldly interaction there, which could just be all mental perception anyway. Again, memories, right? That's the big kind of part there, is if she doesn't exist in anyone's memories, does she exist? That's the mental aspect. But again, regardless, that would be, in that sense, there would still be God anyway, right? As she's the one controlling that mental perception. But again, something to where versus a physical world where, if you believe in creationism, God created, right? Is the more mental aspect would be, we in a sense are our own gods, because it is our mental, perception, right, which gives things physical form. So we essentially create our own world. But regardless, the point being, and why I'm not focusing on it, is that it doesn't matter. That's basically what that kind of rant or tangent was about. So that doesn't matter. The whole digital, virtual reality, none of it matters, because it could all just, again, it really doesn't. Again, but with that, it's been 33 minutes. It's like 10 p.m. I want to go to bed. Me sleepy, right? Am I physically tired or mentally tired? No, let's not get into that. But again, we answered the two questions, or at least pondered, thought about them. What is Lain, and then was such normal life possible? Who knows? I don't. But with that, I'm going to end it. I don't really have anything else to say on it. So, yep, that's it for this one. See you in the next one.